Did that fix it? Is anyone here besides me?
I'm here.
Yep, I'm here.
Looking at right now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Pam Green. It is truly my pleasure to be here today and to welcome you to our webinar with Ms. Brenda Harrington, ACC CRP. And I am just excited to your presentation, Global Mindset, Communicating Success Successfully Across Cultures. Before I introduce Brenda, let me just share a little bit with you about the HR Coaching and Career Institute, because I know we have some who are just new to our community. We're founded way back in 2012 and transitioned over the years into a space where we could provide HR leaders and coaches a way to build their professional careers and their personal brands by presenting relevant topics that will help you throughout your career. And today is one of those topics. And I'm excited to present Brenda Harrington. Brenda is a certified global mindset inventory facilitator and executive coach. She works with organizations and individuals to navigate challenging transitions. She's a global delivery team moderator through Harvard Business School Publishing and contributor to the New York Times, U.S. News and World Report, CNN Money Magazine, and the International HR Advisor. The list of credentials and credits to Brenda's name goes on and on. It's truly my pleasure to introduce to some, present to others, Ms. Brenda Harrington. So Brenda, take it away.
Thank you so much, Pam, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're calling in from today. I'm so happy to be here today to have this conversation with you. You know, whether or not we're working in a global role, all of us are faced with increasing challenges involving diversity. So the conversation today is really to help us all think about how we can manage those relationships and conversations more effectively. So I just want to go over what we're going to talk about today. First, I'm going to provide a working definition of what global mindset means. What are we really talking about when we use that term? And then I'm going to give you a little glimpse inside of the science behind global mindset, the significance of it, why it's important, and why it's something we need to be mindful of, particularly as HR professionals. And then we're going to talk about the components, how it's broken down, and how we recognize different aspects of global mindset. Then we're going to bring that from concept into context, okay? I'm going to give you some examples of how this shows up on a day-to-day environment. And then I'm going to give you some information about how global mindset can be developed and position you ideally for continued learning after today's conversation. We are going to leave room at the end for questions and answers, but I do encourage you to ask questions along the way as we're going through the material. So please, if you have a question, please chat it in or raise your hand and we will definitely address it. So it's no surprise that we're doing business in a global environment, right? We're all accustomed to that. We've heard so much about globalization over the years. But there was a point in time where business and industry really experienced a very sharp increase in the number of firms that were considered or classified as multinational corporations. And let me just stop here for a second. A multinational corporation is one that's registered in a number of different countries or that has a presence in a number of different countries or regions operating from a central location. So when we think back to, I'll say the turn of the century, late 90s, coming into the early 2000s, we could count the number of multinational companies in the hundreds. Fast forward to 2010, 2011, the number exceeded 100,000. So with that sharp increase came challenges with people working across cultures and experiencing people who had different approaches to doing work. They think differently, they had different professional habits, but more importantly, they had different expectations. And so that complexity really brought about a new series of challenges for business and industry. But what was really conspicuous was the fact that there were some people who were able to thrive in those environments and others who experienced profound failure. And so industry really started to question, why is that? What is the difference between someone who's able to be successful and someone who is not? Now, some of you may be familiar with the Thunderbird School of Global Management based in Phoenix, Arizona. It's actually now part of the University of Arizona. Thunderbird for years has been renowned for its work in the area of international business, and many people pursue advanced degrees at Thunderbird. And so they were contacted by senior executives throughout the world, to ponder this challenge. What is it that you do when students come through your program to help them prepare for global experiences? And there really was no good answer. But upon receipt of that question over and over, the people at Thunderbird decided that they would broadcast a wider net, if you will. And what was interesting was that when they asked the question, everybody said, no, we don't have anything, but if you have something, we want to be part of it. Let us know, because everybody was beginning to experience these challenges. And so they decided to develop a research project to, one, define what global mindset really meant. This was a term that had been borrowed from academic and business literature, but nobody really had a working definition. And then they wanted to understand the antecedents and the consequences. How does a person have global mindset? Are they born with it? Is it something that they develop? Is it something that they learn? And what is the impact of someone having it? They wanted to make it measurable, develop metrics to determine what impact it could really have, or what the impact would be of not having it. And then finally, they wanted to make sure that not only was it measurable, but that it was something that could be validated and that was reliable, so that we could use the tool. We could use it as a tool when making decisions about human capital, and global assignments and things like that. And then finally, determining whether or not it was something that could be learned. So this is how the Global Mindset Project came about. And it started as a series of conversations and interviews with business leaders, senior business leaders around the world. And they asked a very broad question: what does global mindset mean to you? And here are some of the responses. It means an individual has a global passport, but in their heads. The ability to understand the similarities and differences among cultures and their reasons. Rather than being frustrated and intimidated by the differences, enjoy them and seeking them because you find them fascinating. So as you can see, this slide represents a diverse series of responses that they received to that question. And I think we've all known people who respond to these situations in this way, and perhaps come up with opposing responses. After thousands of interviews, or more than 1,000 interviews, I should say, there are a few key elements that emerged, and here's what that was. That having a global mindset meant being able to influence individuals, groups, and organizations, both inside and outside of the firm, who represent diverse cultural, political, and institutional systems under conditions of rapid change and high uncertainty. So after refining all of what that meant, they were able to come up with a working definition of global mindset, which is what we work with today. And that is that global mindset means possessing the individual attributes that help influence individuals, groups, and organizations that are unlike your own. And we're going to see that breakdown here throughout the presentation. Well, the research and the results of the research and the data were found to be so profound that the Thunderbird Institute School of Global Management was able to attract, not solicit, but attract support and funding to create an institute that was solely focused on the science and practice of global leadership. And that's how the Najati Global Mindset Institute, which is part of the Thunderbird School of Global Management, came into being. Now, with all of that data and information, they were able to identify three key categories, if you will. And we call those capitals. So the three capitals of global mindset are global intellectual capital, psychological capital, and social capital. And those three capitals are described across 9 dimensions. Those 9 dimensions are broken down further into 35 capabilities that were identified as really making the distinction in certain circumstances about whether a person had the ability to be successful or would experience challenges based on what their job requirements were and what they were expected to do. So let's take a look at each of the capitals a little bit more closely, starting with global intellectual capital. This is really the cognitive piece. And we want to know here, what is a person's global business savvy? What is their cosmopolitan outlook? And how much complexity can they handle? What is their knowledge of global industry? Is this someone who reads the same local newspaper every day? Or is this someone who consumes a number of different international publications? It looks like we have a question. Do we have a question, Pam?
No, not yet.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that.
No problem.
And then the cosmopolitan outlook. What is your knowledge of different cultures around the world? Are you keeping up with global events in the news? And then being able to connect those dots as it relates to your business. How well are you processing and synthesizing this information? So when we think globally about intellectual capital, it refers to how much you know about your own company's strategy globally, as well as the competitor's strategy and the other cultures, governments, and political systems that might impact that strategy. And how easy is it for your brain to handle all of that information? How do you process it? Now, when we think about global psychological capital, this is really at the core of how you feel about international experiences. Do you have a passion for diversity? Are you interested in exploring other parts of the world? Do you enjoy traveling? What is your quest for adventure? Are you a risk taker? Are you willing to take on risks? And do you enjoy dealing with unpredictable situations? And then finally, self-assurance. What is your confidence level in these situations? Are you comfortable being uncomfortable? And are you willing to expend the energy that it takes to process through all of this? This is what we're talking about when we look at global psychological capital. It's really about an individual's interest. Are you willing to engage in these situations? Do you have a willingness to spend that extra energy that's needed to navigate business cross-culturally? It can be very complex, and so it does take a little bit more bandwidth to figure it all out and to kind of change your mindset when you're thinking about working and communicating across cultures. Finally, global social capital. This is about empathy, impact, and diplomacy. How well do you work with people from other parts of the world or who are just different from you? What is your experience negotiating and exercising influence with people from other places? And how diplomatic are you? How easy is it for you to start a conversation with someone, even though they may or may not have the same background or culture as you do? What is it that you do to be able to engage with other people who are different from yourself or people different from the people that you're accustomed to dealing with? So when we think about global social capital, this really is the behavioral piece, and this is where it all comes together. This is about how you show up. This is your disposition to interact with and build trust with people, especially those who are different from you, from yourself. Now, we know how important trust is in every interaction, but it is really critical to global work. When two people trust each other, they can pretty much work together. But what trust means to someone from China may not be the same as what it means to someone from Russia and certainly from the United States. So it's less about objectivizing trust and more about really understanding what it takes to develop and build trust among the people that you're required to work with. Now, the Thunderbird School of Global Management was able to bring all of this forward into an instrument that enables us to measure global mindset across the 35 capabilities that we touched on a few minutes ago. And by using this measurement, we're able to really zero in on where a person might have a blind spot or a challenge that will interfere with his or her ability to do a good job in the new environment. so often we look at technical competencies and experience, and we take a very conventional approach toward selecting someone for a key assignment. And it's usually because they've been so successful in their current role. But the reality is that beyond the success that they've experienced in a home or domestic environment, it really is important for them to begin to build and to develop these competencies in order to show up appropriately in an international, global, or host environment. So the bottom line is that when a person has the appropriate complement of social, psychological, and intellectual capital, they have the right global mindset for what it is they're expected to do, what the assignment calls for, what the leadership team requirement calls for, whatever it is. And when a person has the right complement of those three capitals, research tells us that this is someone who's going to have the behavioral flexibility, and they're going to have the capabilities to really conduct themselves effectively in a manner that will position them to achieve results. So these are the global leaders who are effective at influencing people from different sociocultural systems and political systems, and they're better positioned to achieve the company's business purpose and certainly achieve success on a personal, professional level. So let's take a look at what this looks like on a day-to-day basis, starting with psychological capital. An employee expresses interest in spending time with an international counterpart to learn more about work in his or her country. Now, this is an example of a passion for diversity. It's someone who enjoys exploring other parts of the world, getting to know people from other parts of the world. So they are initiating an interest in participating and engaging in these types of experiences, and they don't find it taxing. It's something that energizes them, perhaps. So this is reflective of a personal interest, and that is a real indication of a high passion for diversity. When we think about global business savvy, an employee asked to work on global projects with global teams and or in a global position. So this is someone that really is learning more, is looking for opportunities to learn more about doing business globally. And when we talk in particular about opportunities for human resource professionals to engage and build capacity around global mindset, this is a really good example of a way to do that, to participate on the operational side, to learn more about the business of the organization and really the complexity of what's required from a human capital perspective. And so this is an example of someone really trying to enhance their global business savvy. And then finally, I really like this one because this is a very simplistic thing to do when you talk about global social capital. The staff at a hotel is composed of Chinese, Russian, Mexican, Iranian, and American employees. The manager has made it a point to learn several phrases in each language to show respect and care for each of the employees. He also spends time walking the hotel to personally greet staff members. And by doing this, he has set the tone for other employees to do the same. And so by building this sense of community, he really has been able to build a bridge between the cultural differences that may exist. And this is a really good example of intercultural empathy, ability to work well with people from other parts of the world and to understand nonverbal expressions of people from other cultures. A lot of times, the things that we experience that are somewhat implicit can be hard to read. And
Hey, Brenda.
Yes.
This is Pam. Listen, I have a question about that. I was coaching an executive and who was working in a Japanese Japanese company in on the West Coast, and said, why don't you greet your senior leader with hello, or say if you learn a few words in their language. So he did, because he was finding it hard to bridge a gap and to kind of learn. And he said that the feedback that he got was, no, 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 I don't want you to speak my language. Don't want you to do that. English is important for our business. And so he just kind of cut him off at the knees as he was trying to, and he was a new manager. So it was really interesting that in that culture, this greeting, he was simple, just a simple greeting in the language, and he nailed it. He nailed it. They just didn't want him to do that. Have you heard of that before?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And you really do have to have an understanding of your environment and the preferences. And it sounds like the other person was also trying to increase his or her global mindset by speaking in English and using more Western habits, if you will. And so it sounds like they were both trying to do the same thing. But I think, you know, it's all case by case, and you have to do what's appropriate for a particular environment. There certainly have been circumstances where I can think of where there's been an appreciation for an effort or an attempt to speak the language or adopt the culture. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
And so as the project continued with the Thunderbird School, they really started to look at where the lines were drawn in terms of different disciplines. So with the respondents, with the people who completed the assessment and the surveys, they really started to look at the breakdown of where different disciplines and where different industries stood with regard to global mindset. And I thought I would pull the human resource piece for the group today. They looked a lot at accounting and finance. That is one area where this has really been an effective tool, because a lot of the things that make accounting and finance people, enable them to be so successful, can interfere with an ability to break down some of these barriers. But looking at the human resource discipline, there definitely were opportunities identified to increase global mindset for the discipline at large. And so they used this human HR management model as a template, if you will, to identify ways for the human resource profession to focus on building global mindset, not only for people in human resources, but for operational business partners. So starting with someone who is in a strategic role in human resources, one of the things would be to learn about international HR best practices as they relate to some of the areas where your company is currently engaged or thinking about expanding to. Working with stakeholders to develop global mindset as a global leadership pipeline. And so this is something that would be incorporated as part of training and development, as well as incorporated as part of efforts towards succession planning. And then when we look at our change agents, learning how to communicate effectively across cultures and in languages where your organization does business, what Pam and I were just talking about. And that varies case by case. There are as many countries and cultures looking to, or individuals looking to learn or enhance their skills in speaking English, perhaps as we are trying to learn other languages. Including diverse nationalities and experience when developing policies, programs, and practices. I can't tell you how many times clients have talked about the challenges of scheduling meetings, certainly across time zones, but also events that conflict with holidays or important observances in other parts of the world. So we have to be mindful of all of those things and not just look through our own lens when we're planning from a central location in particular. From an administrative perspective, evaluating global capabilities of the HRIS system that you're currently working with to determine whether it'll meet future organizational needs and demands. There may be a lot of things that have to be taken into consideration as you expand into doing business in other parts of the world that you haven't encountered, from a home office perspective. So all of those things need to be taken into consideration. And then certainly working to improve onboarding, assignments, and support, not only when a person is going outbound, when we're talking about international assignments, but particularly when they're repatriating, when they're coming back from an international or global assignment. It's important to take those things into consideration because they've now adopted some of those habits that are reflective of their international experience. So it's important to be able to receive all of that when they come back and have a place for them. Employee champions, increasing knowledge of local employment laws and practices. A lot of things that are so important to us here may not have relevance in a remote location, and it's important to take that into consideration, particularly when there's not a local human resource presence and everything is centralized. And then fostering a dialogue with global employees to understand their needs and experiences is so important because they have a very different experience, and it's important for us to be able to look through that different lens to make sure everything is being taken into consideration. So as I said earlier, so often when we are looking at making decisions about who to select or who to deploy for an assignment, we focus on conventional criteria. You know, what is the experience? How long have they been with the company? What technical training and education does he or she have? But it's really, really important to think about competencies beyond their technical and professional experiences. What do they really know about the business's global strategy overall? And how do they feel about being involved with work that requires them to engage with the complexity of different cultures and socioeconomic systems and things like that? It's important to ask all these questions, but also to really have a clear understanding of how the candidate feels about it as it relates to what the business needs them to do to achieve the strategic goals. And so by utilizing an instrument or by exposing them to these questions and things like this, you not only get a better understanding of where they are, but they also, it's a step towards self-awareness. They're also able to identify perhaps unconscious biases and things that they were not aware of that may interfere with their ability to do business. Now, the good news, the really good news, is that this is something that can be learned, and it's something that can be improved. Part of the methodology that went into development of the Global Mindset Inventory includes a number of opportunities for learning and development in many different ways. So, for example, there are a number of activities that can be done individually that a person can do on their own through self-directed learning, either through reading or experiences and different things, depending on which of the skills we're talking about, to help build capabilities across each of the three capitals. Connecting with individuals who have either had experience in the areas or are experiencing some of the things that you'll be facing or managing is another good way. So it's partnering with others to learn different competencies and really have an accountability system, if you will, so that you're able to step out of your comfort zone and try some things and engage in some things that will expose you to some of the nuances of doing business in the new environment or in the environments where your company is considering expansion. And then nothing replaces experience. So learning and developing skills through firsthand experience. And that comes back to considering operational assignments or participation on committees or task forces, whatever it is, that will expose you to doing some of the work with people from other areas and perhaps in other geographic areas. And then opportunities for coaching and to contribute, both from the standpoint of being coached and mentored, but also from providing coaching. One of the things that we talk a lot about in the HPP environment is that when you're able to teach something to someone else or help someone else develop, that is a sure sign of your mastery, if you will, of the information. So finding a mentor, doing a little collegial coaching with a colleague who is also working to develop global mindset. These are all ways that you can work to improve. Now, one of the things that I wanted to share is that the assessment, the Global Mindset Inventory Assessment, is not only available for individual assessment, it's also available, it can be administered as a 180-degree assessment and a 360-degree survey assessment. So in this context, it's useful not only for individuals, but it's also useful for teams. And there are versions that have been modified for the corporate environment as well as government, nonprofit, and even the academic environment. Many schools, many business schools now are looking at tools like this to better prepare their students upon graduation for global experiences. And the tool is also available. It's been translated into a number of different languages. Short of the actual assessment process, there are a number of different workshops that employees and individuals can participate in to learn more about what global mindset means and opportunities to develop global mindset, things that they can do, incorporate into their day-to-day activities to increase their level of global mindset. And those can be done both face-to-face and through full interactive virtual sessions. And then, of course, coaching and development for individuals and teams can be done face-to-face as well as remotely. But overall, it really is important to think about how well we show up, if you will, when we're interacting with people who are different from ourselves. And this doesn't mean, you know, taking an assignment or working with someone halfway around the world. It could be someone sitting in the very next office who just happens to have a different background. There are a lot of things that interfere with our communication and our ability to build trust. And by really thinking about these individual competencies, you'd be surprised at how many opportunities there are for us to begin to bridge those gaps. So I'd like to start now to take a few questions and hear your comments. I'm interested in hearing your feedback or any other experiences that people have had.
Great. Thank you so much, Brenda. I really appreciate your time. And so folks who are on the phone or who are able to watch, we have people that are joined in by phone. We have some folks who are able to actually see this live. Feel free to type in your question either in the chat box or in the Q&A box so that we could begin to answer those questions. And while they're doing that, Brenda, I did have a couple of questions. So interesting because you know, I get a lot of folks who struggle with trying to find jobs, and I keep telling them, you know, think about expand your worldview, and the world has gotten flatter, and it's gotten even easier, I think, even though it's still tough to identify global opportunities. But with that, so there's so many questions that come to my mind, but you know, let's say that you're in an organization and you know it's just not easy to make some global moves. You're open to it, but it's just not easy. Sort of, what are some tips that you have to help people sort of position themselves, in addition to the things that you said here, in an organization where they might have identified certain people, or, you know, how does someone really sort of find traction in this space when they've not found the support internally?
You know, it's so interesting because I had a conversation with a woman just a few days ago who said that, you know, a member of her executive team happened to mention to her very casually that they were looking for someone to take on a huge assignment in Japan. And he was asking for her feedback and input on people. And she said, well, what about me? You know, he says, oh, I just never thought that you'd be interested in doing that. You know, you grew up here and you're married, you have a family, this and that. I just didn't think that would be of interest to you. And so there are a lot of times that people make decisions for us, or they make assessments based on what they think they know. And so I think that it's important to, like the one example I used, to express your interest and desire in doing those things, and even just engaging in conversation about what the organization is doing globally, or in certain parts of the world, or in different offices. demonstrates an interest and a desire, I think. But I think it's a conversation that if that's something that you want, you really have to initiate.
Yeah. And Brenda, with, a number of people who are unemployed and people who just may not feel, I don't know, comfortable making a voice, or maybe they're getting pushback. Is it realistic to believe that, they could go into LinkedIn, which is really a space for HR business leaders to go, especially for their own career development. But 70% of people in LinkedIn outside of the US, how can someone leverage that as a way to, I don't know, expand their global mindset, look for
Yeah,
global.
I think that's a really good question. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think that's a really good question, and the first thing that comes to mind are the discussion groups. And so there are, I don't even know how many discussion groups on LinkedIn. Some of them you have to be accepted into, but certainly finding groups, of like-minded people and engaging in conversations about an article or publication or something that's changed in the workplace. There are all kinds of conversations now about psychological safety and all these different things. And so, I'd say engaging in conversations on LinkedIn to take advantage of that digital networking and getting to know people that way. I've seen some very rich conversations emerge from LinkedIn.
Oh, wow. And then those kinds of things can lead from one thing to another. I know that I do a lot of posting in LinkedIn, and I'm always getting emails and calls and things like that from folks who are looking to place someone. I'm sort of not in the market right now. It would have been great when I was in the market, but I'm not. And so, but it is important to really be out there and let your voice be known, and that you really kind of taking responsibility for, how you want your brand to show up in social media. I think that's a great tip. Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from those who are listening in or watching? We'd love to.
I don't see anything coming in on the chat panel, so. Okay. Pam, are you there? Well, I hope everyone can hear me. I'm not hearing Pam at this point. I have a question from Lisa, who says, I've lived as an expat for 4 years and noticed many people feel intimidated by the idea of moving abroad. Could the GMI assessment help someone prepare for an international move? Absolutely. And that is one of the prime reasons for using the GMI, to really learn about a little bit more about ourselves, right? Because we might experience a bit of trepidation. We don't really understand why. And by really focusing on the incremental differences that we can make to ease some of that anxiety, it really can help. And it helps us to really point to the areas that will put us at ease, if you will. Sometimes, we think about the big picture of, oh my goodness, I'm going to be so far away, and I'm going to be away from family and friends and things like that. But using something like the GMI really helps to get closer to what it is that is really a pain point. And by doing that, you can then seek the appropriate support and resources to break through that.
I got dropped by accident. I don't know what happened, but I'm back. It sounded like
Okay. Yes, we had one question that I've just responded to.
Oh, great. Okay.
Oh, here's another one. Okay, let's see. If someone has a goal to work in another country as an independent consulting, other than taking the inventory to understand what I need to learn, what would you suggest as an initial step? Well, I think that it's important to know what it is you want to learn and where it is you'd like to work. Using something like the GMI can really point to those areas that present the most challenges for you. And so by understanding what that is, you're able to address it and moderate it. I think of a situation about 2 years ago. I had a client that was taking on an assignment in the UK and coming from the US. And because of the fact that, people typically think of London in particular as being the most like the United States, he really underestimated the impact that the move would have. And he really came close to almost complete failure once he got there, because being a tourist and living in a place and working in a place are two completely different things. And so when we came back to his GMI results, we realized that there were a couple of indicators that he really needed to pay more attention to and not take for granted. So I think it's important to just really get close to the things that are going to present the biggest challenge for you. And you don't really be surprised. Those can be as simple as not being able to find the same types of food or cuisine or the things that you're accustomed to utilizing and normal day-to-day activities. So the more you can do ahead of time to prepare, the better you'll be positioned for success. Pam, can you think of any other challenges that your clients have experienced?
Well, and I just typed in one too. It's some questions I've gotten here recently. Is how important is it for me to be fluent in a foreign language to be considered for a global assignment? Should I start with GMI first? And what if I'm not sure where I want to be assigned? So those are that GMI I added in there because I wasn't aware of the GMI until you presented it. So thank you for that. But yeah, so just some stuff to toss out too that I've heard.
Yeah. I don't know that, certainly learning a language helps, but I know an awful lot of people who have been able to be very successful without being fluent in the host language. And it's so interesting because, for years, American corporations, typically when sending people for global assignments, many expats end up living on a compound, all with, other expats from the U.S. And just because we're of the same nationality doesn't necessarily mean we have the same interests and values and things like that. So for safety and security reasons, that all makes perfect sense, but it interferes, I think, with the ability of people to really connect on values and interests and things like that. So I think we've got enough tools at our fingertips now to help break through language barriers. What really is important is being mindful of the disconnects culturally and being willing to honor and respect the host environment and act appropriately.
Great, thank you. You got another question there.
Any suggestions to help me with sell the GMI to my organization? Well, it's an ounce of prevention is what it is. And so when you think about the cost of a failed assignment, the most recent research that tells us that, most expatriate assignments can be valued upwards of 2 or 3 times a person's compensation. So if you have an executive that's making $250,000, $300,000 a year, do the math. Can you afford to lose $1 million or $1.5 million because something didn't work out? And again, it's not because the person is not competent professionally. It's because of challenges associated with the environment and working across cultures. So, the prudent thing to do would be to invest, not spend, but invest resources up front in making sure that person is prepared. And so certainly the expense of taking the GMI and having the associated training and coaching is far less than the $1 million that's at risk if the assignment doesn't work. So that's one way. The other thing, though, is really positioning the person for success, and for organizations who are really committed to developing well-rounded whole professionals and not just focusing on the business purpose. You really are positioning a person to build more confidence faster. They're able to hit the ground running, and so you're not, you're not facing this open-ended onboarding period as things continue to unfold. You're helping to manage the expectations both for the business and for the individual.
And I would even add too that a lot of this is part of our socializing ideas, and I love what you said, Brenda, about this is an investment, but sometimes we we don't really look closely enough at some of those metrics, and the success or failure, and what do we consider a success or failure from an expatriate assignment, because so many of them, studies show, fail. And why is that? So if you want to reduce the failure rate of an expatriate assignment, if you want to look at take a look at some of the analytics that go with those metrics to say
Right.
why are some expatriates more successful than others, and how can the GMI really help to ensure that we're better positioned to have success with this new assignment. I think and then as you said, put all the numbers together. Let's do the math and say, this is the cost of a failed assignment. If we invest this little bit, we can actually get, 3 times the return on that investment fully in investing. But I think it's a little bit of measures, but it's a lot of analytics that needs to go into sort of selling this for business leaders. It's not just say pack up your bags, you're going to China, you just want a one-way ticket,
Right.
but it's making sure that we pack a great punch with that sales tip and giving them more information.
Right. No, absolutely. You've got to outline the value and the benefits. And the first line of defense really is to talk about the business purpose. And so when you put it in those terms, it really provides clarity. And it also depends on the audience. If the person or the unit in charge of the assignment, responsible for the assignment, is led by someone who has been an expatriate and does not experience challenges with these kinds of things, they might not be as receptive or understanding in a situation with someone going for the first time or just not comfortable going to a particular location. So always, what do they say, follow the money, right? So it's always important to quantify the value and the benefits, and they're clearly spelled out here. And there is an impact report, that demonstrates this, and a lot of data behind it to show the value of making sure a person is prepared beyond their technical competency.
Thanks, Brenda. Any other questions or thoughts? Now, Brenda, I wasn't sure if this was your last slide. Do you have a contact slide that people can know how to reach out to you?
I sure do, and there we are. So I really appreciate everybody's time and attention today, and I hope that you've been able to identify one takeaway that will be of value to you, either for someone that you're working with around the globe or across the hall even. As I said, diversity is something that we're challenged with even without taking on a global assignment. But if you'd like to learn more about the GMI coaching and related training and workshops, please give us a call or send us an email, and we'd be happy to learn more about your specific circumstances and discuss how we might be able to help. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brenda. And I really appreciate you doing this. I will just say, to folks, if you really are looking at, increasing, improving, enhancing your global strategic footprint, I would encourage you to, reach out to Brenda and her team, and just learn a little more about what you need to do personally, professionally, as well as what does the HR operation need to be doing to demonstrate strategic alignment with the organization, as well as global competence, that we can handle growth of the organization and do an even more effective job of ensuring that any assignments that we might make to global individuals are going to be successful. And I'm confident that you'll be able to do that with Brenda. So you have her phone number, you have her email, you have the website. I encourage you guys to follow up with her and to make sure that you are able to get the information that you need. So I'm going to share with you the presentation code for this presentation as we say thank you to Brenda. If you are certified with the HR Certification Institute, you can get 1 business/global recertification credit for attending this webinar live or by recording. And the activity ID number is listed here. So I encourage you to make note of it. If you have another certification besides the HRCI, make sure that you let them know that this has been approved by HRCI because you can add it, on your own. You don't have to, we don't have the recertification number for all of them, but certainly make sure that you add it so that perhaps you can get credit and they will recognize the HRCI approved for credit seal. So with that, I want to say thank you again to Brenda for her expertise in global leadership, and I'm so excited about what you're doing, and we'll be following what you do. And thanks to all of you who have joined us today. Have an awesome rest of the day and rest of your week, and you'll be hearing from us soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Pam.